Good evening, everybody, and welcome today. It's October 11th, as we all know, and we want to introduce our speaker and his presentation this evening. I'm Phil Santonzi, Program Chair of ASQ 1510. As always, if you'd like to know more about the section, you can check either on the MyASQ. Well, actually, that's the best place. It's the myasq.org community tab, and look for Southeast Florida section. You can find out information there about the events and other news. You can also join our LinkedIn group if you'd like, and of course, it's by the same name, ASQ Southeast Florida Section 1510. For anybody in ASQ who needs the RUs, the recertification units, of course, you will, if you're here in the room, you'll have half a RU for the workshop that Thomas just conducted, and then another half for the presentation that's coming up. Those of you online will only have, of course, the half of RU for the presentation itself. Our speaker tonight, of course, is Tim Dorsey. He's the founder and partner of the Dorsey Group. He has provided performance improvement initiatives to organizations for more than 30 years. The Dorsey Group has developed a practical and proven methodology for powering peak performance, successfully achieving significant results for clients in quality, productivity, communications, accountability, employee engagement, and profits. Results-oriented and people-focused, Tim's areas of expertise include employee engagement, high-performance work teams, Lean Six Sigma, and agile practices. Tim addresses the ever-changing work environment and how it can be optimized. Tim has published 2 books on improving performance. He holds a Master of Science degree in Industrial Relations from West Virginia, a Master Black Belt Applications Expert from the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers, and Advanced Scrum Master from the Agile Alliance. Tonight, Tim will tell us about the Dorsey multifunction process map. Join me in welcoming Tim.
What I'd like to do is share with you what I believe is the most versatile and powerful tool in the operational excellence toolkit, and that's process mapping. It has the flexibility and the versatility to do quite a bit of things. I'm going to try to explain to you how we've used it over the years. A couple of things about it and about myself. I have a master's in industrial relations, but I went to work out of college for one of the top consulting firms in industrial engineering. And they basically hired us and said, we hope you, no matter what you know, we're going to tell you what we want you to do. You do what we say and you'll work fine. So they taught us to go out and how to do observations on the floor. And we were at 3M Corporation, Eaton Corporation, BC Rail, the Fasco Steel, Container Corporation of America, Ralston Purina. And we were consultants, and we walked in 3 pieces. We were hatchet people. Our company promised when we left, we'd take 20% of the workforce with us. This is back, in the 70s. When we were on the floor, walking around, we were not allowed to talk to the employees. If an employee came up to me and talked to me, my answer was, please see your supervisor. He can tell you what we're doing. We promised we would not talk to any employee, give any instructions that had to come from their supervisors. We would go out on the floor, do our observations, go back into the room, put up a big piece of brown paper and start mapping everything out. It was very, very cold, but we got very good results. Again, you have 7 or 8 people like myself all walking around, all the engineers. It's very easy, once you learn what to look for, how to find waste in an organization. Left there to go with the client, Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel in Chapter 11. And that was very interesting because it was only me now and 12,000 steel workers. Was supervisor of manpower utilization, and my job was to plan for 3,000 maintenance workers. So what did I do? Well, we had what's called the Cooperative Partnership Agreement. Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel, when we declared bankruptcy, is the first and only company that voided their union contract. They closed the loophole the next week in Congress, so it couldn't be done again. But what happens is we had to put 2 union members on the board of directors, and every major operating committee in the company had union members on it now because they were now partners with us. So I had 12 engineers for planners, but I also hired 12 union people to be the planners. So instead of me walking around the floor, I could now talk to the employees, but I actually had the employees going out and helping me do the planning for the maintenance. It seemed to work quite well. So came to Florida on vacation. My wife said, I like it here. Met June Wolf at the SFMA, and she set up interviews for me at Eastern Airlines, Pete Marwick, and FPL. The guy from Eastern goes, "We're going under. I'll fly you down to any interviews you want, but we're going under." He goes, "I'd love to offer you a job, but if I do, don't take it." We're gonna go under. But he flew me down, and I ended up going to work for Florida Power and Light. My early background was one pure industrial engineering first. I mean, cold hard, on the floor, just pure observations, time studies, motion studies, feed speeds, backlogs. Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel, we did the same thing, only we used the employees. It was employee engagement. This is back in the early mid to 70s, so in 80s. So it wasn't a common thing then, but it worked out very well for us. So I learned employee engagement with Pittsburgh Steel. And at FPL, I was on what they called the advisory services team. Anytime that's part of the quality organization, anytime that the Japanese scientists would find problems, we got sent in to troubleshoot. So the next time they came back, it was fixed. Learned industrial engineering, learned employee engagement, learned Japanese quality. That's sort of going to be the foundation I talk about here. Because, like you talked about, April, I firmly believe that this is all based on employee engagement and ownership and accountability. The tools are there for everybody. The companies that are successful know how to harvest it and generate ownership and accountability at the employee level. So a lot of what you're going to see here today is going to tie back into the employees, even though we'll be talking about mapping and the tools and the techniques and all the different things. Fair enough? Have all of you done mapping before? Everybody familiar with process mapping? There's quite a few different types. What I'm going to show you is a pretty just easy version, very easy to do, very simple to use. What we're going to talk about is when I went into consulting, I thought I was going to be working with companies in trouble. I actually thought, it was going to be turnarounds, it was going to be bankrupt companies. It ended up, again, like I talked about, Eaton Corporation, 3M Corporation. Companies were already doing quite well. So that was the first thing that surprised me, is even companies doing really well were trying to weed out the underperformance in their organization, the opportunities and the gaps that existed, even though they were already considered quite successful. So that's one of the big things I learned. So what we're going to talk today about is the multifunction process map. And that's the mapping we were taught 30 years ago at that productivity firm. It's a very simple mapping technique. It works well. We've used it as the foundation for all our projects. Today, our clients are GE Aviation, Illumina, Thermo Fisher Scientific. A lot of people in the aerospace. We're working with Delta Tech Ops for engine and aviation repair, down to small companies, Surface Logic in Pompano Beach with 12 employees. So what you're going to see is a mapping process that it will work in almost any industry in any size organization. The multifunction process map is the manual way we do it. And then the D-MAPP is now using the new technology. How do you get it onto the cloud? Secondly, they both start off with a base map. So we're going to talk about that, and that's going to be the foundation of the presentation. And we'll talk about principles and practices because I think that, Garrett, when we were talking a little earlier today, if the culture is not right, this is going to fail miserably. So I tell people this, when you go into this, if you don't have the alignment in the agreement on how to use this properly, you're just destined to be frustrated. And then finally, we'll talk about how to analyze that initial base map, and then we'll talk about additional tools, because what you're going to find out, your mapping is a very fundamental and foundational type of tool. A lot of things can be built off of it once you've done it correctly. One is, through 25 years of consulting experience, but two, my wife, who's the partner with me, just got her doctorate. She got her master's in accounting from Nova, and then she got her doctorate at DBA from the University of South Florida. And her dissertation was evidence-based decision-making to minimize small business failure. And so she did a 3-year study on that with 7 participants, and she had to find a tool for intervention. She picked the multifunction process map to introduce it to 7 small businesses that had never heard of it before, and went in and met with their executives, and then went in and mapped with the employees and put it all together to see, did it change their strategy? Did it change their priority project? It was quite successful. So what you're looking at here, a map should be a visual descriptive analytic, okay? It should be able to present data to you. It starts off documenting the current state of operations, and it should evolve with you into the future state and the current state. It should create alignment. When you finish the map, there should be key metrics up there that people can align to. You'll be able to identify strengths and weaknesses in the operations, and again, foundation and fundamental, you'll be able to build off of it as you go. Now, I brought an old client map here. You won't be able to see it, but again, you can see it, it was all color coordinated using Post-its, 15 feet of brown paper, and then 5 different styles of Post-its. Large yellow for key processes, key activities the team does, key suppliers, metrics, frustrations. You had a color coordinated up here that you built that map, and basically you put it up in an area, you let them see it every day, you let them talk about it. It was their creation. It's tough for a team to argue with you when you're mapping something they built, not you. Okay, and we always start with a blank piece of paper and got their engagement. And again, so I'm going to walk through that today. But this is the manual version. It can still be done anywhere, anytime. All you need is a brown paper, a few Post-its, a pen, and some good blue tape to hold the maps up. And again, you leave it up there, you'll find them going up to it. They'll talk to you about it, and you create a sense of commonality that unites them. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. Okay. The next version is the D-MAPP, and this is our digital version. It's on the cloud. It works the exact same way. All these things behave just like a Post-it, but it's in the cloud. So what happens is we built this and launched it in March when COVID hit. So it was actually a blessing because now everybody's working remote. You can't put up a piece of brown paper and map. You can do it digitally on a team meeting or something. So it worked very well remotely to engage people who were no longer in the same room together. And a little different color schema, but the same thing is you have your key processes across the top in the dark blue. Anything green represents the supplier input for that process. Anything in gray represents the process work. Anything in pink represents the frustration. Anything in blue represents a metric. A lot of what you're going to hear today and use this is what we call 7 and 7. 7 feet, 7 seconds. The coloring scheme should start telling you something so you can start to interpret this map. 4 key activities, key processes, then defined by activities, then defined by the metrics that go against those activities, then defined finally by the frustration and pain points. What you're looking at here is the key process. That's the 10,000 foot view. Okay, you're going to sit down, you're going to pick a trigger, you're going to pick an endpoint, then you're going to brainstorm. Then you're going to clarify and work down to you've identified a 10,000 foot view of what are the key major processes in this structure. I tell people when you do this, anywhere between 5 and 9 is good. If you get to 12, cut it in half, break it into 2 different processes, because after 12, it starts to become very unmanageable. But the key here is you're going to brainstorm and you're going to gain agreement, and then we're going to build off of this. But first of all, you're going to gain agreement on the key processes first, because you're creating a common language for these people to use in the future. So after you've got agreement on the key processes, you're going to now fill in the activities. And this is where the 2 color codes come in. Green represents something that's an input from a supplier. Gray, or as we talked about, yellow represents something that the team is responsible. And so now I'm building down and I'm trying to create a sequence of activities. It becomes a training document. It can be used for onboarding. There's a lot of other things this can be used for. But the key here is they have just built this. It's in their handwriting. It's on that wall. And you basically pick a subgroup just like he did. Say, okay, you guys, please give me the prospecting. Okay, who's in front of estimate? And you ask the people who own these processes to take the first shot at it. After they take the first shot, hey, it's now they get up and present it to the entire group, and the entire group can now edit it down so that you're getting engagement from everybody. Important part of mapping is the engagement. So now, again, I've gained agreement on that step before I go to the next one. Now we've agreed, here's the processes, here are the activities. Please write down how we measure success. How can we tell if this process is behaving and performing? And again, half the time, you know how many times there's only 1 or 2 things put up here? Employees usually talk about what they feel success is, not what the success of the process is. So oftentimes, the leadership can fill this out with all kinds of metrics they're measuring, but a lot of the metrics at the team level don't really exist because they're evaluating performance based on how they didn't get yelled at. They had a good day, not did the team or the company have a good day. So this is that alignment piece, and this is where the development starts. Okay. Finally, after you've got the metrics on there, no matter how many or how few, the last and final question after you've gained agreement on everything else is, what frustrates you? What handcuffs you and does not allow this process to work the way we've just identified? Okay, and this is where you stand back, okay? Because you just ask them about their frustrations. Okay. And if you ask if they have problems, they don't have problems. Their job is to solve them, but they will tell you what frustrates them. So it's very, people ask, why don't you say, problems? People will tell you what frustrates them. So you document the frustrations. Now, what happens here is you're looking at this map now, and you've just created a little, environmental microcosm of how they view their work. Okay. And one thing I'll tell you, this is their perception. Again, you haven't documented anything with data yet, but you now have a view from their perspective of how they see their world. And so what I try to do when I'm working with an organization is the first thing you do is you walk in and do this same map with the leadership team. Then you walk in and do it with a team. And now you look at the gap and the differences between the two. What frustrations are different? What frustrations are the same? What metrics are different? What metrics are the same? That tells you a lot about the organization, what has to happen next. When you compare those two, I call it the family feud method. You said this, survey said this. Okay, it's just a quick, honest gap assessment based upon what the employees see. One other thing, if we could go back a couple slides. As we do this, another thing I found out, we talked about this a little earlier. Most people know how to do their job, but do they know why? Do they know what comes before them, and do they know what comes after them? Oftentimes you hear a lot of ahas, I didn't know this. And so what happens, they're starting to share information, and they're starting to learn why they do the things they do. Because how many times can somebody in one process sub-optimize the entire chain? Okay. So again, when they get to see not only what they're doing as a small team, but what the people in front of them and behind them doing, it adds quite a bit of value. And the second thing I'll tell you is on the D-MAPP version, one of the bonuses is when you create this, if you would click on prospecting, you can now hit submap. It will take that vertical, turn it horizontal, and you can now do a deep dive into one level down. So it's made so that you can keep drilling down 3 levels into the organization. The key process is the activities and then the sub-activities for each one of these. And it makes it very easy and convenient. I want to talk about what I consider the basic principles. I told you, with FPL, the Japanese and Jews who taught us said, hey, quality is built into the process. You cannot inspect it in. Okay. So in other words, understanding that process, making sure that process is working properly is critical to success. So that has to be one of the principles of the organization. Okay. Secondly is 100% engagement of the people. When somebody says, hey, we're going to have some change around here, what goes through most people's minds? Positive or negative thought? Change is something done to you. Somebody says there's going to be progress around here. What do you think? Progress is done with you. That engagement is taking the change, making them engaged in it, and turning it into progress. They see what's happening. They help build it. They have a voice. Okay. They understand that they can help make a difference. So that's a critical part of this is the 100% engagement is you're turning change, which is scary, into progress, which is something they know and understand. And okay. And then finally, the lean and agile thinking is that there's always room for improvement. Okay. That's what I learned. Why? When I was flying into 3M, Tom Peters' book In Search of Excellence came out touting 3M as the perfect corporation. Our consulting firm was in there tearing them apart, saving them millions of dollars on the inefficiencies that were in that organization, which was already world class. So I did learn that is that, even the best, FedEx, don't let the best get in the way of better, was one of their mottos when I did a benchmark at FPL against FedEx. Okay. So I think that's those 3 principles, you need to nurture them with your leadership team, because if they don't believe in those 3 things, you're going to have a hard time really, truly generating the results you want to generate. And finally, there's a couple things on practices here. Let me do something here real quick. Okay. So always room to improve. I made a note here. It's difficult to recover what you don't see. So cost of poor quality. Is everybody familiar with that term? So I built a little example here to show you we have $15 hour labor cost for 1 unit. And here's the time it takes to get through the 8 steps. Here is the man hours required, the crewing, the man hours, the unit cost, any material cost we add to it. And there's 3 materials that go into it at different steps along the way. And when we finish, a unit costs us $70. Okay. We sell 10,000 units. We produce 10,000 units and we sell them at a unit price of $100. So we make $1 million. The cost of goods sold at $70 a unit is $700,000. Our profit margin is $300,000 or 30%. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? That's what the accountants see, right? That's what the budget says. Now, go to the next slide. Well, you know, we have 2% warranty replacement out there. So we're losing 200 units. And to replace those 200 units is an extra $14,000. And during the labor process, we scrap 3%. So we're losing about 300 on the scrap rate. That costs us another 17,400. And then you know what? Over here, we have 10% rework in this loop. So that means 1,100 units are going to have to be reworked sometime during this at the cost of 35,000. So what looked really good over here on the budget, now, you know what? 2% warranty is pretty good. We can accept that. You know, scrap at 3%. Hey, we're killing it. You know, a little bit of rework, you expect that because you know some people have bad days. But what that does is I'm now producing 10,500 units at $100. I'm still selling it for the 1 million, but my cost of goods has now gone up to 766,000. So my profits have dropped to 233,000. So 22% drop in profits, 23% drop in margins. A lot of this is accepted as work order variance. And so a lot of people already will set their expectations or their bars low based upon past performance or history. And they don't ever look at that as being on the table to be recovered. So when you talk about cost of poor quality, oftentimes we're already starting out. When I go into an organization that's running really well, I'm looking at that map for rework loops. I'm looking for the scrap numbers. I'm looking for the yield numbers because that's oftentimes where there's really quick opportunities to get significant recovery. But you have to do something like this with that map, putting data behind what they're saying in those maps to help understand where is the beef, where is the significant opportunities. And again, looking at this the way it says, Operation 1 and Operation 2 have the greatest amount to recover. So now I can do a deep dive into exactly what's it going to take to fix something in those areas. Is it upstream? Is it raw materials coming in the door? Is it, you know, labor behavior? I can now start to get down to true root cause by following process and following the data in that process. That makes sense? What happens here? Consider the basic principles of your culture. And think about what we've done when we've engaged those employees and we brought them into mapping. What I have to do is build their trust. Okay? How many people in here would eliminate your own job? So when people talking about continuous improvement or talking about, you know, improvement, often they consider that with layoffs or, you know, potentially. So nobody's going to eliminate their own job. So you have to work on this. That what's the trust that if they get better, they still have jobs when they're done. Okay. And what you're talking about here too is the Aristotle Project. Have you heard about that? Google's study from 2013 to 2017. Google wanted to find out what created the perfect team. What was the magic elixir combination? And they went out and studied characteristics. You need a Harvard MBA along with an Oxford Rhodes Scholar, along with, you know, a professional mechanic. You know, what combination would make the perfect high-performing work team? And they studied over 280 what they considered high-performing work teams across the world. And they came back and said there is no human behavior or characteristic that was engaged in those teams. There was 2 characteristics. Anybody have an idea what they were? That every team had? Number 1, it's Aristotle says, big write-up on it, psychological safety. Team members felt comfortable participating. They felt their team members had their backs. They could say something crazy and not be ridiculed, laughed at, or, you know, ostracized for something they would say. Second thing was, over the course of the work, there was no dominant or minority participants. When people were asked to step up, they stepped up, did their role, and then got back in their role. So you didn't have it one person dragging the team along, or you didn't have silent Sallies and Harrys sitting in the sidelines just letting everybody else do all the work. These teams were truly engaged, and when they had their role, they stepped up and played their roles. So psychological safety and, you know, balanced participation and engagement across the teams were the 2 characteristics they found. So, and face it, Google people and Google Analytics spent over $5 million in 3 years doing this study. It was probably, hopefully, some decent facts in there. The practices, these are what I call the must-haves. When we build this map, it's construction, not demolition. I'm not going in there telling them they stink. I'm not going in there telling them they got a problem. Hey, this is what you do. It's working. Now, how can we identify how to make it better? Okay. So again, construction, building off where they are, building off a starting point that they're comfortable with. I think that's critical. Secondly, once I have that map up on that wall, we attack that process in those post-its, not the people. You don't bring names up. It's that process. The data is not getting here in time. The material isn't, on time. Whatever it is, you talk about the process. There's never any blame. There's just, this is happening. How do we eliminate it? Okay. You're searching for root. Next is it's data-driven. This is where my wife comes into it, evidence-based decision-making. And I've got one on this one too. There's what you think, what you know, and what you can prove. Okay. Tim Dorsey, working for a consulting firm for 3 weeks. They send me down on the floor at BC Rail Machine Shop because we promised them a 20% reduction or improvement in productivity. And my boss sends me down and says, go do your observations. And I go down there and I talk to the supervisor, and his quote is, everybody here is experienced. My team works hard and we hit our numbers. And then I went through his numbers. He explained to me what their daily expectation rates were. He showed me the numbers they were hitting, and he showed me weeks worth of this data. And then he gave me the big tip. The wheel shop next door really stinks. They have a lot of problems. You should go talk to them. I was bright enough to say that to my boss when I went back upstairs. He looks at me and says, I can't wait to see this place tomorrow morning. So the next day we go walking down on that floor. We're watching these really talented people make their numbers. And I'm walking around, I'm looking, nobody's quitting early for lunch. Their machines are all working. They're hitting their numbers. My boss's pencil's smoking. He's writing so much on that piece of paper. I'm like, this is not good. So we get back upstairs. He said, what did you see today, Tim? I said, well, they hit their numbers. He goes, yes, they did. He goes, is that good or bad? I said, it must be good. He said, is it? He goes, how'd they do hour by hour? I hadn't quite looked at that yet. So now roll forward to my next day. I get out and look hour by hour. He goes, hey, it's real simple. They can do 200 a day, 25 an hour. Nice, smooth day production, right? So I'm now looking and seeing, okay, 15, 10, 20. Here's a 40, here's a 45, here's a 44. And he goes, when you look at this, what question does this raise?
Why can't they do 44 all the time?
If you can do it consistently, how do we make it? Don't attack the people. How do we make it happen the first hour of the day? How do we make it happen the second hour of the day? What do we have to do? What happened in those hours they were able to do it? Material delivery, machines warmed up. What was it? And again, they'd had an expectation. They'd used it. It had been historical performance. Everybody thought it was good all the way through the management of the company, but they were probably working at about 60% the capacity with the expectation set. So the expectation set for the worker, which everybody had bought into, was part of the problem. It was not based upon what was possible or what was capable. It was based on historic performance. So again, using the data, showing to the employee, saying, how can we now help you improve? What do we have to do to make sure these machines are capable of producing? And again, significant improvement was done with the team, with them, not to them. Okay. But again, they've never looked at the data this way. So again, was it shocking to them? Yes. They challenged it at first. Yes. But again, we removed barriers, we removed obstacles, we set them up for success. So expectations play a key role in that, with what you think, what you know, and what you can prove. And finally, alignment. Okay, you saw us link the metrics out there, okay? But one of the things you have to do is now establish targets. And that's where everybody sees the stoplight methodology, green, yellow, red, where it's the green target is what is an acceptable performance level, a yellow is at risk, and a red is remedial where they did not meet the basic expectations. So it really is important that once you have those metrics that you start to establish targets and not just one number, but ranges so that they can identify how well they're moving through it. Most companies have a lot of data. They're drowning in data. They don't know how to use it. Okay. So I like to explain this by simply saying that data is done. It's sitting there. Once somebody comes along and analyzes that data, it becomes information. When that data is then shared with other people in the organization, it becomes knowledge. That's when you can make the best decisions. So it's a question of everybody has data. How well are they at using it? How well are they analyzing it? How well are they at sharing it? Again, build these maps. People are seeing other people's processes. They're seeing other people's requirements. Again, you're starting to put this into action through that basic map. Okay, and you're going to learn where the smart data is. Now, a lot of people know about financial data. Well, these maps give you operational data, feeds, speeds, yields, things like that. What do you call the financial report that comes out the 5th day of the following month?
Too late.
An autopsy. Okay, you can't change it. Give the team the right information, tracking week by week. They can now be proactively making sure that that data hits the targets versus it's a surprise when they find out they missed their numbers for the month. So again, getting data, turning it in, analyzing it, and getting it spread around is critical to success. And just remember, at the end of the month, end of the year, end of the quarter, it's too late. You can't do anything about it. So we want to be proactive about it. So when we talk about the D-MAPP, step one is map and measure. Create that base map for your operations. Whether you're going to do it on a Post-its or whether you're going to do it on software, create it and have access to it. 2, analyze and prioritize the improvement opportunities. Follow the data. Okay, look and find out where there's significance. From there, manage and monitor projects and then update the base map. And then finally, it's a fundamental. There's other tools, cross-training, scorecards, capacity analysis that can all be foundational based on the data you collected on that map. When you look at this map, first one is, do we have agreement on the flows? Do we have agreement on the processes, on the activities, on the metrics? If you don't, keep adding to it. Keep getting everybody involved in it until, hey, this is their perception. It's allowed to be here. I'm not going to censor anybody if they want to put it on here. It may wash out to no data or something else in the future, but you get it up there. Secondly, how are the metrics distributed? One of my wife's subjects had this map of about 8 steps, all this pink, and then 6 metrics on the very last column. The CEO walks in and goes, maybe if I measure something up front, I wouldn't have so many pinks on this thing. But yeah, again, so are the metrics evenly distributed, or are they all focused? Are they all focused on financial, or are they operational? Again, that's one of the analytics you'll do with this map. Okay, are they balanced? Are they clustered? Are there huge gaps? Same thing with the frustrations. Are there clusters in one area? Or are they spread out throughout the thing? If you ever get a process that has no metrics or no frustrations, is that because there are none, or is that because we ignored it and forgot about it when we were doing the analysis? So again, you can always do a reality check when you do this. Second thing I didn't mention, whenever I develop these maps, I usually do it over 2 or 3 sessions. You don't want to try to get this all in one session, because every time they walk away for a week or 2 and come back, aha, I forgot this, they keep adding to it. So that's that continuous construction model. Okay. And again, I know there's swim lanes. I know there's value stream mapping and things. This is very simple that almost any employee can understand when you put this up there in this fashion, this format. Something you can do though is you take those frustrations, you stratify them by type: man, machine, method, material, or you can use the word downtime for the different lean categories of waste. But you want to stratify them, and I'll show you in a minute how that works. The same thing, you're going to identify improvement opportunities. I don't have to be perfect, but I can recommend 1 or 2 initial priority projects so that we can start the problem solving process with this map. And again, you're going to solve one problem and then come back to the next one. So don't worry to pick the best project first. Just pick one they can own, they can adapt, and they can understand the tools so they can turn this into a repetitive type thing for themselves. Fair enough? Beyond the map, we're going to talk about frustrations, how you stratify severity in project status reports. When you put those frustrations on a map. What I used to do is take them all down, go home, put them in Excel, and then start writing them up and stratifying. When you put them in, when you build that map in the D-MAPP system, what happens? It creates a database of by team, process, severity, type, frustration, and then there's going to be a status there for when you link them to projects. That's going to be important. It tells you the date that it opens, so it gives you his background and it summarizes all the frustrations. So what happens as soon as I do that, I get a Pareto chart showing me that waiting and searching is the #1 frustration on his team, followed by defects and rework, followed by transportation, followed by inventory. So it's already doing that first stage analysis for me of the key types of categories that they're having problems with in the organization. I can now go back to that database, download it to Excel, and very quickly pull those out and find out how they're linked or if what type of linkage I have to those, or if I want to start to create a project around one of those. What happens too, again, when I build that map and I put it in that database, I'm getting a database on the key processes, the activities, on the metrics, and on the frustrations. So what happens is I'm getting a dashboard instantly. It'll tell me the frustrations. It'll tell me the severity of the different types of frustrations. It'll tell me all the different processes and how many metrics we're finding throughout the organization. It's there to just visibly take and, again, give me visibility into what is a static map on all. And that's one of the things about this. I mean, I used to build these maps by the dozens and sit in my hotel room at night putting all the data together so I could have reports the next day. So what happens with technology today, you can learn how to use different tools. That information is available for you almost instantly. What happens too is when I link those frustrations, they become projects. So what happens here is I'm now seeing that I have one project in backlog. I have 2 that are prioritized and not started. I have 2 that are in process. One's been completed, one's been put on hold. And so if I click on those projects, it's going to automatically pull down the frustrations that are associated with that project, and I can see where improvements are being made. And one thing about it is I put multiple maps into the D-MAPP, what's going to happen? I get a micro view of each team. I get a view of the departments rolled up, and I get a site roll of aggregate of the entire site. So again, if you're in our types of roles, I want to know how's the organization behaving as well as any one team, because any one team can have its own little microcosm, but at our level, what is the big picture for the big company? That aggregate information is very great to have. And what's going to happen too, when I update that project list, any frustration that doesn't have is backlog. If I have a red dot, that means that there's a priority project that hasn't started. Yellow means there's a project in place. Green means that there is a solution already been implemented, and a black dot would tell you that that project's been put on hold. There's no work on it. How many times am I supposed to say nothing changes around here? We tell you what's wrong, and again, they don't see improvement. So what we're doing here is every time we start a project and we link frustrations to it, it's going to come back to that map and make it a live map, keep it updated, showing you progress against those projects. This isn't the problem-solving piece of it. This is the communication and the tracking and the engagement of the employees so they can see where we're at. And you can say, hey, we felt that, the incomplete work scope and the missing documentation, the new procedures we put in place have cured that. Are we still having problems with that? Because if you're still getting feedback about it, you know that the project didn't stick. So you get feedback instantly, and they understand where we think we're at with these projects. I told you it was foundational. Just like we have those reports about the frustrations and the trends, we also can take a scorecard. I identified these key metrics. Well, what happens, they're linked to the goals. And then remember, I talked about the green, yellow, and red targets. We established that for them. Is it a monthly or a weekly measurement? What's the unit of measure? We can now start putting it in quarter by quarter and tracking so that the map actually generates scorecard. And the one thing about it is they probably have about 30 or 40 metrics on the map. You click on the ones you want on a scorecard because you're not going to measure everything they've identified. What happens is you do try to pick, and I tell people, start off with 4 or 5 key things and grow. Don't try to measure 50 things at once. Get them comfortable with tracking data, measuring it, and then analyzing. And again, this is a perfect example of 7 feet, 7 seconds. When you walk up this, I don't have to look at the data on the visual control board posted on the wall. I can tell you where I'm having problems, what's working, what's not working based upon the metrics. so that they can look and see how is the team performing, not the individual. Are we hitting the targets we've established for ourselves? They can see their trends. Very valuable. When I do that map and I have a roster for the teams, I can very quickly identify the competencies on a map and create a cross-training matrix. So here's the roster, here's the competencies. Do we have balance? Do we have sustainability? Do we have succession planning? Do I have tribal knowledge where if this person leaves, we're dead because they're the only one that knows it? So you can develop a cross-training matrix. A capacity analysis. How many people have problems with capacity? Okay. Do you know what your capacity is if you have 10 people? It's 400 hours. Take that and divide it into 4 categories. Value-added work should be between 60 and 80%. 10%, give or take, project work, 10% training, 10% administration. When you go in and lay that out, 10 people planning 40 hours is not as efficient as 10 people planning 400 hours. So when you establish boundaries for those teams and call them checking accounts, everybody can't be in training. Everybody can't go to every project they get asked, but everybody can't go to every meeting because they have to get the value-added work done, which usually gets stolen because they're all planning individually. So there's a way to look at capacity from the human side of it that really allows them to say, I'd love to work on that project. I know you want me to, but our team's already committed our 48 project hours this week. Go talk to the management. They can allocate value-added time. We'll come. If not, we've already made our commitments. So it gives them checking accounts and gives them a balance to be able to talk to people and say, I'd love to do it, but we've already committed. And I still have to get my 40 hours worth of work done in those 80% of the hours that we have. So that's a huge thing for teams. Capacity. Crewing guidelines. Again, you have the processes, you have expectations. I can put volumes against expectations and very quickly determine staffing levels based upon changes of volumes. Span of control. Again, you're taking a look at the leadership level, the supervisory level against the worker level. How are we balanced? What is the ratios? And then finally, a problem-solving storyboard to tie into the priority projects. Whether you're following the D-MAPP, the 8 Ds method, problem solving has a set of tools and a format. Put it in a storyboard format. That's the first thing FPL taught us and Japanese taught us, so that you can monitor the progress milestone by milestone through problem solving, whether it's the D-MAPP, the DMAIC, 8 Ds, or Motorola 6-step problem solving. All this can come off that process map very easily once you learn how to use that map properly and realize all the foundational information it's on. Features, you're going to build a base map, whether it's on paper or whether it's on the computer. You're going to study it, analyze for improvement opportunities. You're going to create projects, and then you're going to have a scorecard so you analyze data and benchmark against targets and track it over time. Tie those frustrations with a work center monitor to the scorecard, and you're going to very quickly find out the most significant areas to improve the organization. And it's tough for anybody to argue about that when they created it. It's their information on that board and not the outside consultant or the expert from the company who's there working with. Why it's powerful? It's a team building tool. You're getting alignment, you're getting engagement. It's their work. It's used for performance improvement or even for efficiencies. It's good for documentation and standardization of a little training tool that can be used for training and onboarding. You can also plan strategies and contingency planning around it. We had the University of South Florida actually use it during COVID for, they couldn't have classes. How were they going to conduct their classes? They actually built new maps and techniques and tools for doing that. You can create best practice templates. Again, I have a company that does franchising. They've taken the maps and they've created their templates and they give them to say, and what happens when they go into audit, they look at the template, they tell each one, customize, here's where you need to improve. And then finally, ERP implementations. Everybody understands those are probably the most expensive, time-consuming, nasty things in the world. And garbage in means months and years of frustration. So oftentimes going in and doing a good mapping process on those key processes and eliminating and leading them out before they implement the ERP system saves people a lot of time and money, make sure they have the right metrics and the right data in the ERP system. So again, I've used process mapping, this simple version, as the start of almost every consulting assignment in the last 30 years. It doesn't matter whether I've done it at GE, it doesn't matter whether I've done it at a small company of 5 people. people appreciate it. They love the aha moments, and they really have ownership and accountability to what you've done. It's not Tim Dorsey, it's their map. It's, their processes. And that generally helps the sustainability going forward. If you ever want to contact me, my office, my cell, my email, and then our website. My book, Powering Peak Performance, is more along the entire continuum. It has all the tools I've talked about in here. It has all the stories you've heard tonight, plus many more of all the crazy things I walked into, did wrong, and learned along the way. Questions, thoughts?
I've got one for you. One of the things that I work on is I do a lot of assessments to find the opportunities for manufacturers to introduce advanced technologies, Industry 4.0 and all that. And one of the things that we find is that what it looks like is that companies that have poorly defined processes really can't implement any kind of advanced technologies, whether it's even just something simple like conveyor belt or, robots, cobots. Have you seen how maybe anything that you've done has related to that aspect of any of the companies, any ones that have used that have done the mapping first?
Yeah.
Would you say?
Well, again, Aero Turbine was an example. Aero Turbine, we went in there putting an ERP system. We did their mappings so that we could actually clean up, streamline the processes before they actually brought in the technology. We see that quite a bit.
Okay, yeah. So I noticed there are a lot of similarities, or the ideas, the concepts similar between value stream mapping and this, the frustrations as opposed to wastes,
Yes.
and those kinds of things. So that it's an analysis tool for the process.
And again, we were working with like Centos Corporation and a lot of companies where we were at the very front lines, and they weren't engineers or managers. Mm-hmm. So, if you give them some things that scare them, this is something they can see build. They understand it. It's easy for them to adapt to this, and it grows with them. And again, I have to tell you, it's the aha moments you're getting from them as they see different people contribute to it. I give you one last example. At Baxter, they had 2 lyophilizers that were identical, and they had the spare parts for them. Intermittently, they would not work, and you would just get poor yields. And they studied the parts, they studied the machines, they studied the operators, they studied the shifts running, and they could find no rhyme or reason for this. And they had their map up on the wall. And one of the things you do is you bring in the other departments. So they would bring in the supply chain, they brought in the maintenance. The maintenance guy was sitting there looking at them. They got that frustration. He says, those machines are custom made. Parts A is for machine A, and parts B is for machine B. He goes, if you mix them up, they won't marry. And here they've been thinking they were interchangeable. And again, they got lucky enough to put them on the same machine and get their yield. But this is tribal knowledge that has been lost. The team didn't know, but the maintenance guy had been there 15 years, knew it. And I'm sure when they installed the machines, the team knew it. But that's the type of things when you build this map. And again, it's not just for the team. You invite in all their other stakeholders to talk to them and help them understand how they can better help them.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Diego.
The post notes are anonymous, no names, right?
No names. Although we allow you to write the notes and put them up there. Again, you're just not allowed to use anybody's name as, you can't say that Pedro is the problem.
Okay, because many times we use a brainstorming session, we use the post notes, and later we perform like a activity analysis.
Yes.
So, maybe something very similar, or
yeah. And again, I will tell you this: when I do the first maps, the first sessions, I will tell the team, the first session I can ask management to leave the room, but you're going to have to learn how to work with them over time. So this is your one shot to talk about them, because they're going to be in here because they probably have frustrations that you need to hear from them. So again, I agree. There's people that are going to be nervous about doing this. And if somebody's nervous, I say, okay, just write down, put it in later. But you got to respect that, but only for a period of time. You cannot allow that to continue over and over if you're trying to build a team that trusts each other.
Yeah, it's part of culture.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our members and the board of Section 1510, we want to thank you again for being here.